What is the strangest thing you've seen that you cannot explain? I saw a beer bottle dropped from a 13th floor window into bricks and it bounced. Squirrel wearing a leaf cape. Edit. Thank you everyone. Also. Yes, this was a real moment. IDK if maybe the leaf was stuck or if the leaves were somehow knotted. But it was so quick. Not exactly seen, but it's strange. I was around 6 and on Wednesday evening I went to bed. I woke up and it was Friday. I remember asking my mom why is it Friday when yesterday it was Wednesday. She said yesterday was Thursday. Obviously. I asked her what I did on Thursday because the last thing I remember is going to sleep on Wednesday. She named some activities and I remembered none of that. I never found out why I don't remember the Thursday. It wasn't what I saw so much as felt. I was on my way to Petersburg, a small island in Alaska, but the runway was too foggy so I had to stay in Juneau at a hotel for the night. Anyway, the next morning I was sleeping and had my hand dangling in between the bed and the wall, and I swear on everything I felt something grab my hand. It had a grip like a very firm handshake and it literally woke me up out of a dead sleep. I actually got up and checked under the bed and nothing was there. It was very weird. For about 10 years a man would call my home, ask for me, and then ask me if my feet were ticklish. This was 30 or so years ago, no caller ID or anything like that. I would engage him if my family was home. If I said my feet were ticklish, he'd ask me to ask the person sitting closest to me to tickle them. He always hung up before we could ask questions to figure him out. Sometimes he'd get me on a payphone. Like, I'd be walking home from school and a payphone would ring. It was always him. Still don't know who it was. My 3-year-old daughter walked up to my husband one night and straight up said, "Grandpa's dead." Few moments later we get a call from my husband's sister saying that their father had passed away. Happened a few months back. Still creeps me out. Went hiking late at night with my buddy when something big and bright flew right over us above the tree line. It was so bright we couldn't even look at it, and whatever it was, it didn't make a sound. Actually, it was probably the most quiet moment of my life. I remember saying, "What the fuck?" But no sound came out of my mouth. Only lasted a few seconds and it was over. My family used to travel between Utah and Nevada a few times a year when I was growing up. We often saw wildlife on the side of the road or crossing the road. There's one thing that still baffles all of us, though. It was in the middle of the day. On a long, hot, empty stretch of road. I was a teen. Myself, my mom, and a couple of my siblings saw something scurry across the road. It looked like a huge egg. The size of an ostrich egg. Maybe larger. With 2 skinny legs and feet poking out the bottom of it. We cannot figure out what it possibly could have been. 4 Amish men in a room counting money with a money counter while simultaneously weighing out my ounce of weed. Just wasn't what I was expecting. I once saw someone who looked and dressed exactly like me. With my mannerisms and posture. Standing outside a pub I had visited only a week earlier around the same time in the evening. He was finishing a smoke and went back inside a few seconds after I'd been able to notice and get a good look at him. I smoked at the time as well. So it was something I'd have been doing. Not sure if I saw a glimpse of my own past from a third-person perspective or what. Or if I just have a twin somewhere in Dublin. Didn't happen to me but my mom. She was going through a tough patch, not making a lot of money. Single mom with 2 kids, was stressed over bills but had just enough to cover them. Unfortunately, it left us with no money. She was a hard worker and would do multiple shifts at the hospital. Still, it was hard this particular month. She was sweeping and prayed for help. As she turned around to empty the dustbin into the trash, there was a crisp $100 bill perfectly laying on top of the filled trash can. No one lived at our house with us. She was never able to explain it. My dad, sister and I all saw something that wasn't an animal and wasn't human. This was in winter 2015 in rural Saskatchewan. We were driving and it ran out in front of us on the road. It was so fast it was a dark blur, but we all agree we saw long gangly limbs like a deer, but it had human looking arms and legs. We still talk about it. A very badass Great Dane I knew, a former neighbor's dog, was so afraid of a month-old kitten that he ran into the deepest room of his home and didn't stop quivering and whimpering for several hours. For context, he wasn't a timid dog. Little over a month before the mentioned incident, a drunk man attempted to break into their home at night and the dog bit half of his left foot off. P.S. Rest in peace, Scoob. When me and my best friend were teenagers, we were walking home during the wee hours of the morning when a drunk guy basically acted like we knew him and invited us to eat. For some reason, we actually came with him and we ate at this 24/7 joint, where he told us about his adventures around the world, showed pictures, etc. We hung out until it was around 5 a.m. and walked home together. I have no idea who he fucking was. I still don't. Years ago my husband and I were lazing about watching a movie. Adverts came on and we weren't paying much attention. But just as one finished, we both recognized the place it was filmed. Pretty sure we had been there. Took a few seconds to find the remote and rewind. Still talking about our visit to the place on the advert. It wasn't there. We fast forwarded, thinking we missed it. Nothing. Rewound again. Nothing. It's nothing very exciting, but it's totally unexplainable and we still get weirded out when either of us brings it up. My grandfather told me a really cool story. There's a couple of things that grow or rot in trees that glow. Google foxfire. He saw an owl completely covered in this stuff flying around at night sometime in the 1930s. Edit. Ye blew up. Thanks for all the glowy stories. I miss my grandpa. And for the lulz I didn't even think of Mozilla. I don't know why I read these creepy threads at midnight right before bed. Standing outside of a convenience store, I saw two different cars park about a minute or so apart, and go in the store. It was obvious the two didn't know each other. At least it seemed. After shopping, they each left in the other's car. Still can't explain it today without going down the CIA conspiracy route. My grandfather sat on the edge of my bed when I was in the 4th grade and told me a bedtime story. He died before I was born and the only photo of him was in a chest in my grandmother's attic. I hadn't even heard his name before. His life and passing was a sore spot in my family. About 15 years ago I went with my parents to check out a piece of land they wanted to buy to build a home. It was in a heavily wooded area. We pulled into the property, which was quite large, and as we got closer to where the house would be built, we saw about 7 people decked out in fairy clothes. Like fully decked out with wings and everything. It was actually scary. We quickly turned around and then we looked. They all disappeared. To this day we are still shocked. It was the craziest thing in the world. Waterville, Washington in 2013. Saw a red light in the sky that did not move in the way a normal airplane would. It eventually made its way to 3 whitish lights formed into a triangular pattern. It was unsettling.